Well, SABC News reporter Hasina Gori is following proceedings for us, has been for the week. Thanks very much, Hasina, for joining us. I hope you can hear me. Just tell us, give us a summary of the proceedings today. And I did see earlier that things got a little bit sticky as some commissioners were asking Mr. Mlambo about, or Justice Mlambo, about whether he sexually assaulted women in the judiciary.
Yes, good afternoon, Nompu. Quite a busy morning. The gloves came off just after that tea break with the Gauteng Judge President really facing some tough questions around just undercurrents of political bias, as well as you said, these allegations or rumors, it seems to be, of sexual harassment. His response to that was that these rumors seem to have come out or surfaced when he was put forward as a Chief Justice nomination, and that he found it was unfounded. He explained that there were sexual policies put into place at the High Court when two female judges did complain. They did not take the matter forward, but did report to him, and that was his reaction to that specific question around sexual harassment. He was also probed then on whether or not there was an anti-sexual harassment policy within the judiciary. He conceded that there wasn't one. This was a question or a remark that Justice Maya brought up yesterday during her interview process, saying that being a female within the judiciary, there wasn't these kind of policies put into place when it came to sexual harassment. So this was him responding specifically to that question around that. But there was a political undercurrent that came out this morning as well, with some of the questions coming in. Advocate Madonsela asking him whether or not he had served or fought during apartheid, and really turning that response when he said he was a trade lawyer, asking whether or not he could be a vanguard for the Constitution if he had not fought for it. So some of the comments we had seen this morning. I want to bring in legal expert Advocate Dumisa. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with, it's the third day of the proceedings today. Two of the candidates that came in the last 2 days both mentioned you in them you were their mentor, as well as you were your prodigy of sort. How did you feel seeing them up there, hearing them working towards or interviewing for this high position within the judiciary?
First of all, both of them mentioned my name when I was not even here. So, especially with Judge Madlanga, I got to hear later on that he had mentioned my name, and it was in relative to where he did work for me as an advocate in the Transkei. I was an attorney for almost 15 years, or more than 15 years. So both Madlanga and Advocate, Judge Maya, both of them were practicing at the Mthatha Bar. And I learned a lot of work, especially work related to human rights issues. And I used to I kept them busy. So I would not be surprised if they mentioned. But with Judge Maya, President of the SCA, when she said, I got later to hear that she said, I'm the one who was responsible for her being a judge. I still remember very clearly that, when I had been acting judge in the Western Cape, I recommended him to the Judge President in the Western Cape Court. And Judge Slope was a deputy judge president there. And I said, look, there is a female who would be a very good judge as far as I'm concerned. And I recommend him for appointment as an acting judge. And she never looked back, because when she came there, acted for a term, at the end of that term, she had written, I think, 2 reported judgments, very, very well crafted.
talking of Justice Maya, one of the themes that we've seen in all the questioning over the last few days was around transformation within the judiciary, within the legal industry as well. Do you feel that there's been enough transformation when it comes to gender as well as race within the judiciary, and what more can be done?
Well, there's never going to be enough transformation, because in most of my writings, I've said the following: that if one looks at 1994, after we had become a post-apartheid constitutional democracy, there were about 168 judges. Now, if you look at those judges, the demography of those judges in terms of race and gender, there were only 3 black judges: Mahomet, Madala, and Khumalo. And, some of the, legal structures were even saying Khumalo is not really a judge because he does not come from the ranks of advocates and what have you. He was a judge in Swaziland and came over and all that. But the fact of the matter, there were only 3 black judges. Females, there were 2 of them. One was Van den Heever, who was in the Appellate Division, or the Appellate Division as it was then called, and the other one was Traverso, in the Western Cape, which therefore means that there were only 2 female judges out of a judgeship of about 168. What does that mean? It means that over 160 judges were white males. And therefore, there needed to be transformation in the sense that if we were going to be true to the demands of Section 1742 of the Constitution, that the judgeship must reflect the demography of the country in terms of race and gender, there was a lot of work that needed to be done.
We're hearing the interviews over the last few days, and I want to talk on the line of questioning. The JSC has been accused before of, their line of questions being either biased or sometimes almost combative. Today, we've seen a different line of questioning than we saw yesterday. What's your take on that? Have you also, watching these proceedings, felt the same way?
Yeah, well, look, the one thing that I will applaud, and if it is a reflection of what the JSC wants to do when it deals with candidates, is that the questions were robust, they were penetrative, but they were, as far as I have been able to see, they were put to the candidates in a manner in which the candidates felt comfortable, to speak, but they were robust. They sought to make it clear that the candidate had only him or herself to blame if they were dodgy or if they were not answering the question. And you will have seen how a number of the candidates yesterday were told, but you have not answered the question, But it was all done very, very, I think, in a dignified manner. And I never thought there was an attempt to demean the candidates. And to the extent that, President Maya wept, I don't think it was a consequence of the questions that were put, rather than what, it triggered in her when it was put to her that for you to have gone through all the hurdles, being a female, being a black, must mean a lot to you. And then I think it must have triggered something in there. But generally, I think the interviews were measured.
Staying on the topic of Justice Maya, a question that has been put to each candidate right now, and I want to put it to you as well. Is South Africa ready for a female Chief Justice?
Well, my take that question is that it is rather a very unfortunate question. It's not the question that elevates, females to start with, because, the question seems to be suggesting that there was a time when females were not appropriate or were not ready. And for a country that is, committed to gender equality and all kinds of other equalities, being a reflection of the foundational values of our Constitution, I think that question was very unfortunate. I think the proper because let me take two steps back. The first one is, what did we have at the very first Constitutional Court? There were two females there, and one was African, one was white, Kate O'Regan, and Justice. Now, when you look at those two judges, and incidentally, Justice Justice Mohoro, she had come from the academics. She was an academic. And you just have to look at read the judgments and see that here we get someone who we would have lost if our post-apartheid democratic society had not said, we'll draw judges from wherever we can get them. And the rest is history about Maholo's performance, about Kate O'Regan's performance. So if anything, if that question must be asked, it must be asked from the JSC. And I sat in the JSC for a couple of years. We should have said, why are we always getting a president who nominates only males? And, so it cannot be thrown back to the candidates as to whether, they must opine on an issue which was squarely in the area of the JSC to have dealt with in those many years.
Coming back to today's proceedings, we've seen Judge Mlambo, going through some really robust, as you described them, conversation around politics or the undercurrent of politics in some of his judgments, especially with regards to public protector, as well as being almost accused by one of the commissioners of having a soft spot to President Cyril Ramaphosa. For someone who might be the next Chief Justice, how important is their independence to the politics, and how does that form part of their interview today?
Well, the unfortunate part of today's proceedings is that it's not over yet. So there are still 101 commissioners who are still going to put questions. So I think it would not be appropriate for me to make a pronouncement on his performance in the way in which I've been able to make some measured pronouncement about Madlanga and about Justice Maya, because I don't think they will be recalled to come and be interviewed. It's still early days in the examination interview of the Judge President Mlambo. So I would have been more comfortable to pronounce on his overall performance if we were saying this interview is being done at the end of it all. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was Africa's Dumisani speaking to us here at the lunch break of the third day of the JSC interviews. The third candidate being Gauteng Judge President Mlambo, really going through the rigors this morning. But as you heard from the advocate, this is just early days. There's still many many commissioners, that are yet to pose questions to him. He's fielded some of those, with regards to sexual harassment, rumors, as he put it through, as well as some of his judgments around especially public protector. He was also brought to light by some commissioners some of the complaints and concerns that have been brought out against him, as well by the Democracy group as well. But I want to bring in one of the experts that we had spoken to also yesterday, who really helped us, understand and unpack some of the issues that we saw happening, throughout yesterday's proceedings. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining us once again. I want to start with, we're here today on our third candidate, and we're seeing a very different atmosphere, a different tone from that collegial, almost carefree atmosphere we had yesterday. A slight tenseness that's here. Let's talk through what that feeling and emotion's been like from this morning.
Yeah, so it has been quite a tense interview, and I do think that we did expect it. There have been, in the previous couple of months, allegations about the Gauteng High Court specifically, and these rumors about the judge president being captured or being part of the Cyril Ramaphosa faction and things like that. And so we expected some of this to play out, and I think we saw that. Right, he has been questioned substantively and extensively about the judgments that come out of his court and allocations of cases and things like that. Certainly a very tense interview, and I think the most tense that we've had so far. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In comparison to yesterday, do you feel that this was due to Justice Maya being a female that they were softer, or is it just because of the amount of concerns and complaints that have been leveled against this specific candidate?
I absolutely don't think that it's an instance of Justice Maya being, a woman. I think that all of these candidates have very strong personalities, have very strong histories or different histories, and these interviews have been focused on very different aspects of their work. I think you'll know that Justice Matlanga's interview was very kind of legal, jurisprudential. Justice Maya's was more about gender transformation and things like that. And today's interview seems to be pulling into a lot of the public conversations that have been happening around the judge president and the Gauteng High Court specifically, and a lot of just political gripe with some of the decisions is coming out. And I expect probably tomorrow's interview as well to be just as tense, if not more.
So before we let you go, I want to get into what we heard from the Gauteng Judge President on his vision, very different from all the others when they spoke about it. He went into really practical issues of the court. Will that work in his favor when they look for the next Chief Justice?
So I definitely agree that he had a lot more targeted, interventions in problem areas that we actually hadn't heard about until today. And he seemed to have a real grasp and an appreciation of what was going on the ground. And I think that will work in his favor, and was able to outline in very specific details, very specific steps, how he plans to change and turn these things around. So a very, very impressive, I think, start to the interview. If we don't get bogged down in some of the other things, but I thought that was very strong. Yeah.
You brought up public perception or public conversations being one of the key areas that have come up in this interview. As the next Chief Justice, how important is that public perception of that person sitting at such a high role within the judiciary?
It is absolutely important, and that's why I think it's so important that the judge president was to a large extent very frank, and dealt with the questions well, going deeper, throwing them back, giving examples and saying, if you are suggesting some of these unsavory things about me, you need to be the ones to provide me with the details. Here's my answers to those things. And I think that he will come out looking stronger, for the reason that he has now had a public opportunity to respond to some of these allegations, which hasn't been the case in the past year.
Thank you so much. That was Dan speaking to us here on the sidelines of the lunch break of day 3 of the JSC interviews. Really been a busy morning, as you heard the Gauteng Judge President Mlambo speaking to us in the morning, really outlining his vision, a strong start to that interview, really breaking down on practical levels of how he would change the judiciary from the highest courts to some of the lower courts, bringing bringing in infrastructure issues that the courts are facing, speaking about the Palmeridge Magistrates Court, which is one of the fairly new courts in Gauteng, and how it's already needing an upgrade, talking on other courts such as the Protea Magistrates Court in Soweto, which seems to have no space, and talking around how those interventions will assist the courts, but also talking on digitization and modernization. He highlighted some of the trips that he had been on with former Chief Justice Mogoeng, where they had visited various countries like Brazil and Malaysia to seek ways and ideas on how to digitize both the case files archive that they have, and he described it as being able to fill at least 5 rugby fields with just that amount of files that they had when it came to case law, but also talking about digitization in a way that was accessible to some of the impoverished areas in the country as well, using an example that he had from Malaysia when he visited with the Chief Justice, with former Chief Justice Mogoeng. So really practical answers and interventions that we hadn't heard from the other 2 candidates over the last 2 days. But then after that tea break, really fielding questions from commissioners, a lot on public perception, a lot on concerns around his political affiliations, on his judgments that he had made against some political cases, but also that rumors of sexual harassment that were leveled against him, really answering those questions. So once we come back from lunch, I'm sure we're going to see that similar line of questioning continuing throughout the day. Back to you in studio now.